Thanks so much, guys. So I'll try and talk for about half an hour or 40 minutes or something about the origin of the project. I'll give it a little bit of context and explain. The first thing I suppose I need to kind of demystify is that very frequently people assume that it's some kind of wish-granting app where like miraculously you're going to kind of make stuff happen. The app doesn't do that. It takes one positive action every day in the direction of travel in terms of what it is that people have articulated, but I'll specify that a little bit more, and then, as I say, talk about the history of the project, where it came from, exemplify some of the actions that the app takes, and then talk a little bit about what the conceivable future of it might look like. And then, as I say, I hope at the end we'll have time for questions. I've also got to caveat this talk by saying that we've had a couple of technical issues with regards to setting up the slides, so if at some point the screen goes dark, then you'll have to forgive me while I try and remember how to reboot it. So just a tiny bit about my background. I've always worked in the kind of media sector, so mainly in television, and for a brief spell for a couple of years at the radio station KISS FM. I've worked for a bunch of advertising agencies for Channel 4 and also Comedy Central, the Viacom-owned brand. And about probably 4 years ago, I just turned 40, a classic midlife crisis style of thing, and I'd had this idea, and I thought, if I don't now do something about putting it into the world and making it happen, maybe it will never kind of manifest. And there were three principal kind of creative influences that I had. Not necessarily things that I was utterly obsessed with, but they're just things that had caught my attention, and I'd maybe bought a book or looked into them a little bit further. The first of these was a project called Post Secret. I don't know whether anyone's heard of this, but a guy in the States called Frank Warren, not to be confused with the English boxing promoter, asked people to hand make a postcard on which they articulated something that they had never told another living soul, and to anonymously send it to him. And he received literally hundreds of thousands of postcards, this guy. He's done 6 books now. He does exhibitions, speaking tours. What started as a kind of reasonably understated and scruffy Tumblr blog became this phenomena. And I was interested, I suppose, at the little snapshots that this gave into people's lives. There was no backstory, although often it's possible to kind of imagine what it might have been, and he didn't really know what happened next. But just this idea of a brief glimpse into someone's kind of soul was something that I found really kind of engaging in terms of the authenticity of it, I suppose. Super unpolished, very authentic, as I say, and something which kind of resonated. Very frequently, kind of melancholic as well, you know. I smile all the time so that no one knows how sad and lonely I really am. The type of stuff that in this increasingly kind of polished world of social media, we would be unlikely to post, say, on Instagram or something like that. Something that felt like, because of the anonymity, people's identities weren't associated with it, felt like it was coming from a kind of truer place to me. There was another thing that I really, really did like, and this I did buy all the books, called Found magazine, and this, again, was a kind of pretty understated project started by a guy called Dave Rothbart, and he just produced a compendium of notes that either people sent him or that he found. And that was it. And again, it provides a similar kind of a little snapshot into people's lives, and there was something super fascinating about it, and they were simultaneously disposable. Literally, they were trash that he found in the street, but also I thought kind of potent and really interesting. Call Me Dad Died. I thought that, you know, I wonder what's kind of going on there. What's the nature of that relationship? This one here I really like. Mario, I fucking hate you. You said to me that you had work. Then why is your car here at her place? You're a fucking liar. I hate you. I fucking hate you. Amber. P.S. Page me later. So those kind of things where, as I say, it told you everything about someone and nothing about someone simultaneously. And I was really into that. Also, and this has become a tiny bit of a kind of millennial cliche, you could argue it has maybe 15 million followers on Facebook now, this Humans of New York project that you'll be familiar with. A photographer called Brandon Stanton just meeting people in New York and taking photos of them and hearing what it is that they had to say about their lives in a paragraph or two. And there's some extraordinary kind of wisdom contained therein. There's some amazing pathos contained therein. There's some super inspiring stuff as well. But again, I guess what links these three projects that, as I say, I was kind of preoccupied with was they just provided this limited little snapshot, almost like a Polaroid, as I say, of someone's soul. So I was thinking about this kind of concept for a while, and I was also looking, I suppose, without doing some wholesale, competitive analysis of what the marketplace looked like. I was seeing the kind of apps that were out there. At the time, there were a few anonymous ones, Whisper, which is still quite a big deal, one called Secret, which has kind of segued into being something else, and another app which was super popular for a while on college campuses in the States called Yik Yak, all of which were anonymous apps which again allowed people within your network to say something which they probably wouldn't say had they, were they in a position to have to associate their own identity with it. So I thought, let's create an anonymous place where people can post the things they most want in the world, whatever those things may be. And that was my initial iteration of the idea. So I'm a reasonable devotee of the lean startup methodology and a lot of the Paul Graham essays, the Y Combinator founder. And what I didn't do was to go out and try and raise VC capital or anything like that. I did a super scruffy, low-cost iteration of this primary idea, and its sole function was just for people to articulate in 100 characters or less, as I say, the things that they most wanted, whatever those things may be. And I kind of thought when I was building it with the developer guy, well, maybe that'll just be what it is, But when I looked at it and we tried a little bit of a beta test and I got some user feedback, paradoxically, something which was designed to be a little inspiring ended up feeling slightly kind of flat and listless, because what was happening was that were people, as I say, were articulating their hopes, dreams, desires, aspirations. But if nothing was happening as a consequence, it ended up feeling like a slightly deserted kind of Pinterest board where people had put this stuff, but it just was a repository for half kind of forgotten dreams and thwarted ambition, So it ended up, as I say, feeling a little bit kind of tired and strangely a slightly depressing place to hang out. So the thing that I suppose catalyzed it, and I wouldn't want to over-exaggerate the extent of the success of the project, it's not like it's some Snapchat-style phenomena, but the thing that people seem to kind of gravitate towards or that galvanized it was this idea of taking meaningful, real-world action. So I'm really very interested in technology, but equivalently interested, as we all are, I'm sure, about the kind of things that happen away from keyboard. So I thought, could you do an interesting thing? And I was, quite into these projects where the app itself was like a nicely designed thing. Take Airbnb, for example. That's a cool app. You could design it in loads of different ways. Website looks nice. Endlessly kind of changed and iterated to try and perfect it. But the amazing thing about Airbnb was the fact that millions of people were having these extraordinary weekends where they met someone who became a friend in a foreign city. That was really what the user experience was. That was the real kind of UI right there. So I thought, is there something cool that you could do to bring these aspirations a little bit closer, not to miraculously, like I said at the start of the presentation, and as it says up here, not granting wishes in the way that you might see in a kind of children's fairy story or a schmaltzy Disney thing, but just, I suppose, adhering to the credo that any action is better than none. Is there something that we can do about each of these wishes that makes them a three-dimensional real thing, a couple of steps closer to that professed aspiration rather than it just hanging around on the internet being like another tweet or something? And that was all the kind of thinking was. So the site's actions are unique and freshly created every day, and they can be anything depending on the nature of the wish. And you see, like those three projects that I was talking about at the start, you see things which are happy, are sad, are melancholic, are uplifting. The interesting thing about it, or one of the interesting things that I found about it, is that no two wishes are kind of alike, and a wish which is super kind of sad and heartbreaking seems to sit quite happily alongside another wish, which might be, as I say, uplifting or euphoric in some way. So there were only a few guidelines which people have been pretty good at adhering to. Of the many thousands of wishes there are on the site, I've probably had to delete like 6. I think most of them were for the same person. And as it says here, basically, I don't know how well you can read that. Don't be lame. You know, it's not that funny to kind of write, oh, I wish I could fly or whatever. Don't be greedy. So say, I wish I had, you know, a free Rolex or whatever. That's not going to get any traction. And the way in which the site was working in terms of its UI is that the wish that was most upvoted each day, the wish that came to the top of the list, the top of the chart, as it were, that was the one that was going to have some action taken against it. Don't be a dick. So any form of behavior that advocates kind of breaking the law or some kind of racial hatred or something like that, that was just going to get taken down. Don't be gross. Don't be too selfish, etc., etc. P.S. We've heard the thing about unlimited wishes loads. It's hilarious. So people seem to kind of understand. It's self-governed pretty well, the site. And if occasionally there is something weird on there, someone will typically email me and say, oh, you know, you should check out this wish. It looks a bit odd. But as I say, they were all completely anonymous, 100 characters or less. And the wish that got to the top every day at 6 o'clock, that was the one that had action taken against it. So let me give you some examples of the actions that the app takes. So there's quite a lot of Trump stuff at the moment for obvious reasons. So I think the wish was, I wish that Donald Trump wasn't such a dick, but I've had variants of that loads of times. Now that's a thought that probably everyone has had. What you get from this project is that I actually wrote a letter to him at the Trump Foundation. Weirdly, he never wrote back to me. I don't know why. He must be busy. But it's just a kind of slightly sarky, why did you once tweet tiny children and not horses? Everyone knows that already. What were you thinking when you said, if Ivanka weren't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her? Can you not see that's kind of gross, etc., etc. And that stuff, in terms of growing the site, goes over pretty well on Twitter, back when Twitter was still like a thing. It's a dig at your competitor there. And so sometimes I'll do something in the spirit of the wish itself. So that's clearly a tongue-in-cheek, slightly ironic wish, and so the response is equivalent. When people wished, there's quite a lot of stuff about the elderly. You know, there's a phenomenon in this country and to a certain extent in the States where there's an epidemic of loneliness amongst old people in this country. And very frequently, I forget what the statistic is, but it's a high percentage of people, or a surprisingly high percentage of people, will go like 2 weeks without having any form of human interaction beyond the most prosaic one with a shopkeeper or a postman or something. So when people wish for a treat for the elderly, myself and my girlfriend, thank you very much for helping me with that, visited an old people's home over the Easter weekend and festooned it with hundreds of daffodils and chocolate eggs. When people wish that their commute wasn't so boring, I changed the signage on the tube. So it's very easy to download, as I discovered, the London Underground typeface, and I just adjusted the signs to give people a bit of a smile on their way to work. So as I say, it's one thing every day, and I don't like go into a thing where I say, right, I'm going to do every tube train or whatever. It's what you're buying, in inverted commas, although it's free, what you're buying into is 24 hours worth of resourceful, industrious, hopefully creative kind of action. But everything starts and ends within that 24-hour period. I never say, oh, I'll get back to you in 3 weeks once I've got 1,000 signatures or something. This was a wish from a woman in Scotland whose daughter had been badly bullied in secondary school. So she came down to London and we arranged a really nice day out for her. I used we in the royal sense. I mean, I arranged a nice day out for her, and she went. What did she do? We met for breakfast, and then she went to the Royal Ballet and had a kind of backstage tour there. She was really interested, like a lot of teenagers are, in a potential career in the performing arts. So she met a ballet dancer and had a kind of backstage tour there, and then the ballet dancer gave her little ballet shoes, which was really sweet. Then she went to Pineapple Dance Studios and met with someone who had been a backing dancer for like One Direction and lots of people, and gave her a kind of dance class. Then she went to meet a friend of mine who I knew from my time at Kiss FM, who's a super nice, very, very sweet, charismatic woman who is one of the DJs. She does the afternoon drive time kind of show, and so she had a cup of coffee with her and talked to her about this experience that she was having in school. And then in the evening, she went to a performance of Mamma Mia, and she wore all black and like was sitting at the side of the stage with the stage manager and saw how that kind of whole show was put together. And a couple of those things were people that I knew already, but a couple of those things were people, and this happens quite a lot, who were already on the site. All 4 of those people had been bullied themselves when they were little, and they said, I see you've got this wish coming up about bullying. Well, I would be really happy. I'm an actress now, she should come down to Mamma Mia, or this person at the Royal Opera House can help in this particular way with the ballet, etc., etc. So very frequently, I'll be coordinating something which the community itself is volunteering in terms of what it is that they might like to do to help, which is kind of nice. This was, you remember that a while back where the Boko Haram, the Islamic fundamentalist group in northern Nigeria, kidnapped those schoolgirls, some of whom have now been released. And so I went to the Nigerian embassy first thing in the morning before it opened, and had written the night before the name of each of the missing girls on a post-it note, and then covered their doors with that as a kind of gesture. And very frequently, as I say, it is a gesture, so I'm not claiming that as a consequence of me doing that, the girls were miraculously recovered. It's just an articulation, a visualization, a 3D iteration of that which would otherwise just be a bit of social media kind of ephemera, I suppose. You know who I mean by Katie Hopkins? It's like a female Piers Morgan. Someone wished that she would sign a gagging order. And by a very strange coincidence, I was reading a magazine in the week before this wish came to the top, and I saw that she was due to do a speaking event. She was going to be in some debate about Brexit or something. And so I went along to that debate, and I folded over a piece of paper, got her to sign the bottom here with her lame signature, which has a pathetic little heart. And little did she know that clearly it wasn't legally binding, it was just like a joke. But she's saying, in fact, I'm sorry and embarrassed for pretty much everything I've ever done at I'll go. Now that joke only works if you know who she is, but she's a fairly reprehensible human being. Very frequently they're about things, social ills that we can see around us, the wishes. So if people wish for help for the homeless, I'll just go out again, not miraculously claiming to rid the world of the problem that it has with homelessness, but just visit half a dozen people, take them some sleeping bags, a cup of coffee, sandwiches at lunchtime, whatever it may be. When people wish for more love in the world, quite often they're quite abstract things like that, which as an expression of something are a nice sentiment, but they're kind of woolly. So I'll try and do something kind of crisp and specific with regards to it. So on this occasion, people wish for more love in the world, and then distributed flowers all over London so people can take them back, give them to their boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, tell them how much they love them. That was pretty popular. There was this thing, I wasn't aware of this phenomena, but this is a very popular wish where people felt that when they went to an upmarket department store, Harrods or Selfridges or whatever, they were frequently condescended to by people who worked on makeup counters. I didn't know that that was a thing, but apparently it was. Lots of people said, oh yeah, that happens to me the whole time. So I put this sign in Harrods: customers should be advised that they may be subject to withering looks and occasional condescending comments. We trust this will not detract from your shopping experience. This again was the community helping. So this was a really sick boy in Florida who just wanted to get a lot of birthday cards. And so Crowdwish members sent them to him. This was a thing, remember, this was another arcane bit of tax law. I actually think it was a bit of EU legislation rather than something that was maybe under our kind of aegis in the UK. But feminine hygiene products were taxed as a luxury item, which was obviously insane, and there was quite a lot of stuff online about that. So I sent this tampon in this luxury packaging to the Chancellor of the Exchequer with a sarcastic note. This was people wishing there was less bigotry in the world. So I sent, have you ever seen that website, Ship Your Enemies Glitter? It was like a big deal a couple of years ago, because glitter's a fucking nightmare, isn't it, if you open an envelope? So I sent this, EDL or something it was called, like a horrible kind of, far-right extremist group. So I sent the leader of that. I wanted to think of the kind of campus thing that I could do. So I had a vision, whether or not this manifests, I don't know. And sometimes it would be nice to be there when this stuff happens. But I had a vision of this guy getting covered in glitter and reading this sorry, not sorry note. When someone wished for a half-decent boyfriend, I put up a kind of missing sign, presumed non-existent, just not a dick, basically. And again, what happens with these things is you only need to put up one sign. I did actually put up more than that, but I think I put up less than half a dozen signs, and then someone sees it, takes a photo of it, and by the end of the day, I had a load of people getting in touch saying either I am that boyfriend, so if you find someone, then I am the candidate who ticks all this kind of criteria. I have my own teeth, positive bank balance, etc., etc. or a lot of people saying, look, if you do find this mythological man who I'm convinced doesn't actually exist, then let me know, because I'd love to have a date. So I probably put together 7 or 8 couples. And again, I don't follow that narrative. I just say, look, I'll introduce you guys. I hope you have a good time, basically. When people wish that, this isn't like a political thing, by the way, but you know, Jeremy Corbyn was getting quite a lot of shit for looking scruffy, and he did look pretty bad, I thought. He did look kind of scruffy. And David Cameron, didn't he say something to him at PMQs about my mother would be ashamed of you or something? I can't remember what it was. But anyway, a friend of mine runs this shirt company called Charles Tyrrett, so I called him, Nick Wheeler he's called, and said, can you send me some smarter clothes? And I swear that I have seen Jeremy Corbyn wear this. I swear I have. I noticed that he didn't declare it, because I thought, how am I going to find out? Because the kind of guy that he is, I just dropped it off at his kind of, where he does his surgeries as an MP in Islington, and I thought, how am I going to know? And because whatever you think about Corbyn, the guy's got integrity, I think. He's got political integrity and integrity as a person. And I thought, I'm sure he's going to declare, like working for the BBC or lots of institutions, if someone gives you a present above a certain value, you've got to make a declaration about it, right? So that you're not susceptible to bribery, particularly as an MP. But I haven't seen him make a declaration about these shirts. It may well be that he just passed them on to his nearest charity shop. Who knows? But I'm pretty positive that I've seen him wear that. So like I say, that's happened. Something of that ilk. Those are just a few quick examples, and there are literally hundreds of others. That's happened every 24 hours for the last 1,136 days. People are really into it. You know, the Paul Graham guy, and if you haven't read Paul Graham's essays about everything, basically, but the guy is super articulate and incredibly kind of perceptive. But one of the things that he said in his, he writes an essay about getting traction for whatever your new business is initially, and how it is you find your first customers. And he said, and this really resonated with me, you're much better off creating something that 100 people absolutely love rather than 1,000 people think is kind of okay. And that I thought was going to be my kind of guiding light with this project. That's what I'm going to do, find something that people are super into rather than the kind of slightly ambivalent thing that occasionally I might dip in or out of. And because there's a frequent, what you'd call in TV world, appointment to view slot, because every day at 6 o'clock something new is getting published, there's a reason to keep coming back. So people's reactions have been amazing. I would defy you, actually, without sounding too kind of self-congratulatory and annoying about it, to find a website which has as positive feedback as this one does. It's great for press, you know, because you're always doing something or invariably doing something which is either positive or mischievous, and tonally, like I was saying, the juxtaposition of things which are slightly kind of anti-authority meets things which are just kind and positive, you know, existing in that space is good for social sharing. And then, and now, as a lucky percentage of you have, I did a book deal about a year ago to write a book, and basically what I've done there is to take 99 of the most popular or wishes that just appealed to me. So it's a selection of 99 of the 1,000 plus that there have been, and it attempts to articulate in a reasonably kind of light-hearted fashion how it is that you can get a little bit closer to the aspirations that you might have. So it's like a kind of self-help book for people who would never read self-help books. And as you said at the start of the conversation, it's designed to dip in and out of a classic book to have by the bath, basically. And so other publishers around the world have picked that up. I don't know that everyone's going to do these 99 covers. That was an idea that I had that I never thought. Initially, I thought, let's do 5 covers. Because I was quite interested, you know, sometimes you'll see a magazine like Vogue will publish with 5 different covers, or GQ for their Man of the Year awards, you know, and one will have Tiny Temper and one will have Michael Caine or whatever. And I thought that must work quite well on newsstand, otherwise they wouldn't do the incremental investment to do that. I wonder whether that could work for a display in a bookshop. And it does actually look nice in the When you see them all together, this is at the publishing house. This is something I took this photo the week before last. When you see all 99 together, there's a kind of visual gratification, and I guess it's illustrative of the fact that these, without again being too hackneyed about it, these wishes are super kind of diverse and no two are alike. That was the underlying point. And the designers did a brilliant job on that, The tone of it is designed, as you'll see, to be kind of light-hearted and accessible. So I wish I could have a dirty weekend. I wish they made gentlemen like they used to. I wish I could find the best slice of pie in the world, etc. Which I have found the best slice of pie in the world, but that's another story. So it's not, I hope anyway, too kind of earnest in that regard. So those of you who have got a copy, I really hope you enjoy reading it. Do post a review on Amazon if that is the case. Meanwhile, so I'm thinking, okay, so what can I do with this thing? I've managed to make it kind of not too expensive to run. As I say, I'm a massive disciple of the lean startup ideology, so you would be surprised how little it has cost to do it. But you can see from those examples that I gave you, it doesn't cost that much to send a bunch of glitter to a far-right leader, for example. They don't need to be enormous, grandiose gestures, these things. But I was thinking, okay, so how am I going to make this like a commercial proposition? And in a way, is it going to spoil the fact? Because no one's ever been charged for anything. Is it going to kind of soil it or somehow compromise it if it becomes something which has got this commercial overlay on top of it? So my solution to that, such as it was, I may well be proved completely wrong, but this is my endeavor, and I'll try and be successful in achieving it, was to say, okay, so let's see if we can make it a kind of cross-platform entity. I've got ideas around live events, there's a website, there's an app, there's a book, as I say, which you have in front of you now. And then I thought, okay, so let's see what we could do with a TV show, yeah? Because wish fulfillment in TV terms, it's been a huge kind of genre, and if you can get it right, then it's fantastic because it's heartwarming. It appeals across a huge kind of demographic, and particularly large commercial stations like ITV are really into programs where the whole family is gathered in front of the screen rather than a singular demographic. They don't really sell a singular demographic in the way that a niche website might. They sell reach, and they sell particular kind of profiles around adults with children, etc., etc. So if you can get it right, then it's cool. But I didn't want to do something which was so kind of vanilla or lowest common denominator that it felt like it wasn't adhering to the spirit of the project to date. And so I got a little bit of cash from a network in the States, actually. And then I linked up with a guy called Ryan McPherson, who I only knew by reputation, who runs a slightly shadowy collective of, it's like an anarchic kind of art collective of graffiti artists and civil activists who exist as this kind of shadowy force who can be marshaled when given an instruction from their leader. I know that makes it sound slightly kind of cult-like, but they do very cool things. So I thought he'd be good to work with. So he's based in Las Vegas. So I flew out to LA. He came down from Las Vegas. We had a little pot of cash that the network had given us. And so I'll show you now the film that we shot, which is like what they call a sizzle reel, which you then take out to broadcasters and see whether or not they think there might be potential in developing it further. So you can see there, like I say, a kind of combination of things which are random acts of kindness meet the articulation, I suppose, and obviously I realise that Donald Trump is like a super kind of lazy target for anything satirical, and I realise also that he was democratically elected, but it is additionally the case that there's an overwhelming number of people who are pleased to see him lampooned. And so, as I say, the site isn't miraculously claiming that they'll be able to remove him from power. You're just doing something to kind of visualise the wish that people have made. So the ambition, as I say, oh wait, I've gone too far, is to have this brand that lives in every vertical or a significant number of verticals. So a web presence app exists already, iOS app. I haven't done an Android app yet. I'm sorry about that. I should have done. The book, which exists, the TV, which it depends who it is that one partners with. Like I say, if you do it for ITV, you might got to do something slightly different to that, which is going to be a little bit too edgy for them. So it depends who your partner is. There are a number of people who are, if you were looking 10, even 5 years ago, you had a TV idea in the States, you could either go to a network, NBC, CBS, Fox, etc., or you could go to a cable operator to get your ideas away. Now those people are still buying stuff, although they're increasingly risk-averse creatively, but there's a new generation led by Netflix of obviously on-demand players who are interested in innovative content, and Amazon have joined that fray now, putting significant budgets into originated, both scripted and unscripted. And I think we'll see now a new wave of Snapchat-style people who are wanting to get into the content provision game. And I noticed with interest this week that Facebook have developed a Slingbox-style app that enables you to watch Facebook videos. Videos obviously amazing for them. They're putting strategically a whole load of stuff around going live, blah, 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 blah. An app that enables you to watch that stuff on your TV. So this convergence that we've read about and heard about for so long of all the screens coming together into a single entity, that time is upon us. The other aspect, and I'm not like a crazy kind of data head kind of person, but it is interesting to me, and obviously one needs to use and harness that data in a way which is respectful and appropriate, but the idea that people volunteer information about the things they most want in the world, and then something meaningful happens as a result, I think is a kind of powerful one. One of the reasons, he said, stating the blindly obvious, that Google is the extraordinary company that it is in terms of its cultural impact and in terms of its money-making abilities, is that if I put into Google as a search term flowers in Brighton or flights to Paris or therapist in London or whatever it may be, that's a pretty strong indicator that I'm in demand for those things, thus people competing to bid on those key search terms. And so I wouldn't want to take this into a kind of territory whereby one was aggressively exploiting that, not suggesting that you guys do that, by the way, but the idea that, and I haven't fully developed this thought, so you'll have to bear with me as it is only partially formed, but the idea of fleshing out and making a bit more human and a bit more rounded and a bit more as we are as individuals, those kind of requests whereby your prosaic transactional requirements have a kind of counterbalance of things which are a bit more intrinsic and a bit more kind of inner directed. That feels interesting to me potentially. And I think that we will see outside of search, let's just assume that you guys have nailed search, which I think we can say that you kind of have. But outside of that, in terms of brand building stuff, and search isn't always the strongest way to build a brand and make a contribution to that. But I think the most resonant brands in the future are going to be looking for these cross-platform solutions. They're looking for meaningful data, not anonymous reach. And that's one of the reasons why commercially, for example, a organisation like The Guardian, and massively kind of deferential towards The Guardian in terms of their editorial stance in the world, but one of the issues that they have commercially is I think they went through a period of thinking that reach and scale was going to be enough. Oh, we're in Australia now, we're in the States now, we've got this bureau, blah, 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 blah. Actually, advertisers need something and want something slightly more sophisticated than that, and anonymous reach is increasingly quite a tricky thing to monetize. They want meaningful insight. Again, stating the blandly obvious, but engaging content, not broadcast messages, rich experiences, not just conventional kind of media. And also, I think, particularly for the kind of Generation X, I don't mean this in like some kind of quasi-religious sense, but being possessed of a higher purpose, not a purely transactional thing. What is it beyond enriching your small group of shareholders that you're on earth to do? What contribution is your brand making to the world? I think that's a super important kind of thing. And finally, we're all super adept at zoning out advertising messages. If they do reach us, we're likely to be cynical about them, but we do try as hard as we can to avoid them. We have ad blockers, pop-up blockers, we have spam filters, we have signs on our letterbox saying no junk mail, we have PVRs that enable us to fast forward through the ads times 30. And so I think increasingly, I'm not one of those people who says, oh, that game's over, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it is over at all, but what is the case is that it is irrefutable that if you are associated with an action as a brand, that is something which has taken place and happened in the real world. And so if I was creating a kind of mini model in terms of how it is that brands should engage with their consumers in the future, I would say that do something meaningful, do something special that resonates with people, and then use media to shine a light on what it is that you've done and encourage people to kind of share it. And I think that if one gets that right, that can be quite kind of powerful. So like I say, I don't know whether people still talk about moonshots. You know, you used to hear that phrase moonshots in terms of something which feels like a large idea that you probably won't necessarily be successful in achieving, but nevertheless you don't let that prevent you from setting out on the endeavour. And I think here, and this, as I say, I've done this completely on my own. Occasionally my girlfriend helps me out. Intermittently I have an intern, but I kind of find that managing the interns is basically easier just to kind of do it myself. So this is how far I've got on my own with no money, no VC capital, anything of that kind. And fundamentally, when you boil it down, this is a place where anyone can share the things they most want in the world. They can articulate those things, and a meaningful outcome occurs as a result. And that to me feels like, you know, a pretty big thought that I've only gone like a tiny, tiny distance of scratching 1% of the surface of. But that's my kind of like guiding star in terms of the core principle from which I will not kind of deviate. And as I say, if I want to amplify that as an idea, I think that conceivably is a genuinely huge thing. So, you know, it's really not like a big deal, this thing. And because I hadn't quite worked out a monetization model, I was in this slightly weird situation where, you know, normally everyone's super obsessed with getting users, and we've got all these growth hacking techniques, and there's entire industries that have grown up around how it is that you acquire and hold on to users, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't like that, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I just wanted to do something cool every day. And I know that sounds a bit ridiculous, but that is genuinely the activity that I've been engaged with. But there are a load of wishes on the site now. There are too many, actually. And one of the things that one of the aspects of the experience which doesn't work, and I could do an entire longer presentation about all the flaws in this idea, I hasten to add, is that if you put a wish on the site at the moment, like layers of sedimentary rock, you know, you've got to kind of get through loads before it gets to the top. It's not quite as tricky as one necessarily might think, but that can be a bit demotivating. Back to my original problem, when I put that thing on there and then nothing happens, no one agrees with me, no one likes my wish, that's the kind of thing that can be disproportionately depressing. And so sometimes I wonder, in this ephemeral, disappearing photos age in which we live, maybe I should just reset the board every day at 6 o'clock. And all the wishes should vanish, and then people remake them. But maybe that itself would be like a laborious and demotivating experience to have to once again put it on there. So there are loads of things still to kind of crack. But currently, if hypothetically speaking, I stopped taking wishes today and just thought, right, I'll action all the wishes that, you know, are on the site currently, it would take me over 30 years to get through all the ones that are currently there, which I haven't got time to do. Anyway, I'm at the 45-minute mark, so I've slightly gone over. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate your time. It's a great privilege to be here. We've got a little bit of time for questions if anyone's got anything that they would like to ask me. Oh, thank you.
Hi. Sorry, I came in a little bit late and...
You've probably got no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah. What am I doing? No, just you may have explained this at the beginning. I was just wondering how you funded, or is it sort of self-funded, or?
Well, it's a kind of combination of things. It's at the kind of size now where, say, and this is a true example, so it's an easy one to give you. Say the wishes, quite a lot of the wishes seem to relate to a low level of anxiety, where people are articulating the fact that their lives haven't quite turned out in the way that they hoped they might, basically. So say the wish was, I wish I didn't feel so anxious, which I've had a bunch of times. I could then, as I've done, reach out to, there's a little brand called Rescue Remedy. Do you know that brand? It comes in a little pipette, and you put a couple of this, it might be psychosomatic, I've got no idea, but it claims to work, chills you out and stills an overactive mind. So I can say to them, and herein I think lies something potentially again quite big, because what advertising does historically is advertising vomits all this stuff into the world and hopes that it mops up a few people who are in market for what it is that it's got to offer. Whereas what it is that I'm offering is a whole load of people who have self-electedly raised their own hands to say, I am feeling anxious. So that's really valuable data. So I can, in my, as I say, low-level way, it is just me in my bedroom kind of thing, I can say to people, I can say to the dude at, you know, Rescue Remedy, I've got a load of people here who have already told me that they feel anxious. You claim to make this great product. Why don't you send a sample of your product to each of these people? And if it's as good as you claim it is, I'm sure you'll have some customers for life. Or if it cures their anxiety, you probably wouldn't, would you? But you get the point. The fact is that it's really valuable to be able to have a conversation with a brand and say, I've got people who are in market for what it is that you do. And so I've been able to do that, which enables, therefore, the end user to get a good result. I put this wish on a random website, and now someone's actually sent me a physical thing in the mail. That's cool. So that's a great result for them, and it hasn't cost me anything to do it. So that's one way in which I do it. Sometimes I spend my own money on it, but I try not to for obvious kind of reasons. And sometimes, and I'm reasonably good at doing this, I'll create a solution which I think is potentially potent, but doesn't necessarily have a huge budget attached to it. So the examples that I gave, I'm not sure what point you came into the presentation, my friend, but the examples that I gave were all pretty low-cost things that people seem to enjoy. So it doesn't need to cost the earth. My worry, and I easily could have, I think, this is slightly lessened now because we're in an economically more uncertain time because of Brexit, et cetera, but there was a time a couple of years ago where it was quite easy to get, let's say 200 grand or something, seed money from, a wannabe tech investor. The issue then becomes, their business plan becomes your business plan. And I didn't want the management of minority investors a pain in the arse at the best of times, but I wasn't quite sure how to make money out of it and whether or not the way in which I thought I might ultimately make money was going to be something that they enjoyed. So I just thought I'm just going to retain 100% of the equity and just do it myself. I don't know whether that was the right decision or not, but that's what I've done.
Yeah. So in this sort of world of fake news, how have you thought about sort of guarding against becoming a propaganda machine? I'm thinking about the Donald Trump thing. If now that he knows that happened, which he probably didn't like very much.
Yeah. I doubt he lost too much sleep. He seems pretty thick-skinned.
But now that that's come out, maybe now people will start to look at your platform and take it much more seriously, and then sort of try to battle against it. So how have you thought about how you might?
Well, I mean, my response is maybe a tiny bit in terms of what I've done so far. Might be inadequate. I'd be happy to concede that it has been. What I've done is to, when I write up, what I generally do is like post the photo of the thing and then do a couple of hundred words of copy, sometimes a bit less. And I'm at pains to point out that we don't have a kind of political dog in the fight, et cetera, to stress the neutrality of the platform. And what I've also found, so in the case of UK politics, I did that Corbyn thing, which is a slightly sarcastic attack on the leader of the opposition, I suppose. Attack is too strong a word, but you know what I mean, a bit of a diss. I did a Ed Miliband thing where people wish that their MPs spent more time in the constituency that they're ostensibly meant to represent. So I sent Ed Miliband a map of his constituency in North Yorkshire, where he apparently was very infrequently seen. I've done a bunch of David Cameron things. I did a thing once with another politician whereby it was a kind of trade thing, basically, where he wasn't doing enough for free trade, so I sent him a load of bananas, et cetera, et cetera. So if I was to evaluate it, everyone has been kind of, not as I say that anyone's losing any sleep over it, but everyone's been tarred with the same brush in that, to the extent.
If they're starting to see that something will happen if a wish with them attached to it starts becoming a thing, that they might start going, right, this wish about Donald Trump being shown for who he is actually needs to be stopped, and then they try to stop it from becoming the wish of that sort of.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to the stance that I've taken so far on it, as I say, is to say if sufficient number of people feel that this is something they want to see happen, I'm not a political person, but I will make your wish, naked Trump statue, whatever, I will make it kind of manifest. But whilst doing that, I'm going to stress that personally, I don't have an opinion about Donald Trump. We're just a service that brings things to life that otherwise, as I say, would remain tweets or whatever.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. There was one here.
Hi. What's your trickiest wish been to manifest? Have you had one that's ever really stumped you? And it's
because I suppose I have a bit of a get out, because I'm not, like I said at the start, I'm not guaranteeing to kind of make this stuff come true. I'm just doing a tiny gesture. So generally, I only set out to do something that I know I can achieve by 6 o'clock. And I learned the hard way early on, where I would find myself thinking about what the train times were down to Kent so I could do some prank on Nigel Farage or something. And then I think, shit, I just haven't got time to do this. I'm going to have to give them a downloadable poster or something instead. So generally, I don't come unstuck that often. I haven't missed one yet, but definitely some of them are more testing than others. And I'll think to myself, okay, what am I actually going to do here? And typically those are the more conventional wishes where someone will say, my son is really ill and he just wants to go to Disneyland. And because one thinks about wishes in that kind of sense, I think, because you've seen that on TV programs or you've read about it on the press or you saw some GoFundMe that went really well or whatever. So quite often those are the times when I feel like I'm disappointing people a bit, because I will help them with that. I'll publicise their campaign, I'll tell the story, and I'll amplify it to the people who follow me on social media or whatever, all of which is kind of positive. But there's a part of me that's thinking when they put that wish on the site, they thought they were going to be getting tickets to Disneyland the next day. So that's the kind of time where I think, oh shit, that's something that they're maybe going to find a little bit underwhelming. But although having said that, no one's ever got in touch with me and said, oh my God, that was so lame when you did that thing, I hate you. They might have thought it.
I'm interested to know your thought process around how you keep control of the actions and whether or not you've considered sort of outsourcing to the people on the site. Because when you said about the old people home, you could have, with the users, you could have scaled that so everyone did. But then as we went through the presentation, I was like, oh no, you probably want to keep control of, of most of these.
I've got someone I know a little bit, I don't know her very well, but we've had coffee a couple of times, has got a site which relies on peer-to-peer wish fulfillment. So I go on there and I say, I live in Shepherd's Bush and I'm having problems with my boiler. Both those facts are actually true, coincidentally. And then someone else says, I will totally help you with your boiler. And I say, oh, that's great. We've made this fantastic Craigslist-style connection. But simultaneously, I'm mindful of the several serial killers who have stalked Craigslist. And so I'm thinking, there's a vulnerable woman who lives on her own. She doesn't know what to do with her boiler. She hasn't got the cash that it necessitates to get Pimlico plumbers out, which is, in my experience, many hundreds of pounds. And so this guy is going to, who I have effectively brokered an introduction to, is going to manifest on her doorstep. I don't know who that fucking guy is. He could be absolutely anyone. And so that's one of the reasons. And that kind of stuff, aside from how hideous some kind of incident would be of that nature, obviously, but that shit can kill a platform in seconds, rightly. I'm amazed that Airbnb have come back so many times from people trashing apartments in New York and having amphetamine-fueled gay orgies and all this kind of crazy stuff that's happened there on many, many occasions. And in fairness to Brian Chesky and co, they've always managed that incredibly well. But I didn't want to be dealing with that. And so I thought that if I'm in charge of it, that works better and it de-risks it. And editorially, I can sign off my own kind of idea, which in implementational terms just makes it way simpler. It's like working for an ad agency and pitching an idea to the client and then going to sit in the client's chair and say, yeah, I buy your idea. It makes it much, much easier because I've got to do something every day. There are, however, occasions where if it's publicising someone's fundraising idea or a little boy wants a load of birthday cards or whatever, I just say, look, send me all the birthday cards. I'll package them up into a single parcel, which makes more sense, easier, domestic, cost of a stamp rather than international, and I'll send them all. And that works really, really well. Or people will get in touch with me directly. And again, it says on the site, if you think you can help out, then email me. And then I can slightly vet that person. So they'll say, look, I'm brilliant at, I'm great at public speaking or helping people overcome confidence issues, and here's my credentials for that. And then I can say, okay, let's meet and have a cup of coffee. And I've met loads and loads of people, because very frequently the wishes relate to career dilemmas and so on. So I just say, look, come in and we'll have a conversation and we'll meet. And that's invaluable kind of feedback to get, because, oh, how did you find out about the site, blah, blah, blah. But 98% of the time, I retain that control myself, just because, as I say, it would terrify me to broker two strangers, introduce them to each other. That could be weird. Is that it? Is it time up? It's 1:30. You need to get back, guys.
Thank you very much for coming,
Thank
Phil.
you.
That's
I hope
been really
that made
fascinating.
sense. Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it.